Andrew, alternative assets in retirement accounts has become a very big topic recently, especially after the recent executive order. So let's set some ground rules first. How do you define alternative assets or private market assets or basically stuff that doesn't trade publicly?
Sure. So I think everything's getting painted with one broad brush. It's a big bucket and there's lots of different things underneath the hood. Broadly speaking, nothing's really new here, but really I think that where you've seen a lot of momentum recently is private assets. So non-listed, so equity stakes, debt, real estate, infrastructure, so things that aren't listed, things that don't have kind of a market.
Why do we need things without a market, unlisted, non-public assets in our retirement accounts? We can just put the ETFs from the indexes in there. They're doing great. Why do we need illiquid stuff?
Sure. I mean, I think there's been some large secular changes over the last 10 years. The number of listed public companies is down by half over the last 20 years. And so to me, it begs a question on a forward-looking basis. Will you be able to get the same kind of dynamic growth that you've seen as these companies graduate from small cap to mid cap to large cap that you've traditionally seen in public markets? Potentially that's moved on more towards the private space. And so if you want access to those dynamic companies, I think you have to go where they are.
So it's an opportunity for investors to start getting the assets that only institutions and endowments used to get previously. But how is it an opportunity for advisors? Because, hey, it gives them something to sell, right?
So certainly there are trade-offs, right? And I think with access to these new markets come additional complexity, additional governance that you need, and obviously the illiquidity risk that comes with this. It's not going to be for everybody. I think we're still really early days, but certainly things are changing there, particularly on the access side.
And how is Rowe Price taking advantage of this opportunity?
To me, I think about this as kind of just broadening the opportunity set. We've always been big fans of diversification. Like I said before, I think you can get access to some of the most dynamic opportunities in this space. And certainly I want that in my opportunity set, but I still feel like it's early days. I think liquidity is something I mentioned before. Certainly there's new vehicles called evergreen structures, things that offer interim or semi-liquid, but it's still early days. A lot of these have, short track records, and ultimately I think you're going to need some time to know whether or not you can port the secret sauce from private illiquid structures into these more liquid vehicles.
And we're certainly seeing a lot of them hit the market. Does that give you pause at all that generally people like things that are liquid because they can get out when they need to get out? But with private market assets, not that easy.
In my view, I think these really belong within a professionally managed portfolio. It's a small allocation in something where there's already lots of liquidity today. And I think the key here is you're introducing a liquidity risk, but you're getting a premium for it. So ultimately the idea is you're getting paid for the liquidity risk. It's not something that's in the portfolio today, but I think it's a small piece of an overall professionally managed portfolio.
And then finally, what's next for the industry? Because a lot of people didn't think we'd get to this point where you could put alternatives in retirement accounts.
I think what's next is really the regulatory side. I think, most plan sponsors I talk to still, early days, I think they're skeptical. I think they want to talk about it, but I think they want some cover. I think everybody's worried about the fiduciary risk. And I think until we see significant momentum on regulation, so we see how these new vehicles perform in real life, until we see potentially some movement on fees, I think until you see convergence in all three of those things, this is probably still early days.
All right. Well, thanks a lot for coming on and talking about it.
My pleasure.